First, I would like to thank Indivisible Binghamton and Citizen Action for inviting me to speak on behalf of the Together for Ukraine Foundation today. And I just want to echo what Reverend Chastain just said about everybody doing their small part. There's so much going on right now, and I just find that my small part as a Ukrainian American is speaking about Ukraine. So thank you for being allies with us. For those of you who don't know, my name is Christina Zawerucha, and I'm a member of the Together for Ukraine Foundation. We are a local 100% volunteer organization dedicated to rebuilding the lives of refugees and restoring freedom, justice, and democracy in Ukraine. And we need your help. Whether we're filling a shipping container to send supplies to people fighting on the front lines, whether we're performing music and arts workshops to raise money for Ukrainian hospitals, or whether we're working to find affordable housing, transportation, work, and education opportunities for newly local refugee families, we are always grateful to our community members of all backgrounds who come to help. So I encourage you to please learn more about us, look us up on Facebook, and check out our website, togetherforukraine.us. We're standing here on the eve of Dr. Martin Luther King Day, on the edge of what many fear will be a great change in our nation and in the world. While Martin Luther King was an important advocate for nonviolence, I believe he would have wholeheartedly supported Ukraine's fight for freedom, justice, democracy, and human rights. As he wrote in his letter from Birmingham jail, quote, "Freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed." Ukraine has been fighting to defend its freedom from unprovoked Russian aggression and genocide for hundreds of years, even more so since the full-scale invasion in 2022. The situation in Ukraine is critical, and the United States cannot turn its back on Ukraine now. Make no mistake, Russia is a totalitarian state with a long history of media control, censorship, corruption, oligarchies, political imprisonment, systemic state violence, and human rights violations toward political activists. Vladimir Putin is a strongman dictator who must be thwarted rather than emulated or appeased. After its long fight for independence from the Soviet Union, Ukrainians understand and value freedom and democracy more than an unjust peace under an oppressive authoritarian regime. As we fight for human rights here in the U.S., we must support Ukraine's fight for human rights and democratic norms in Europe and for the whole world. While it may be unpleasant to think about war and military spending, there are times when it is existentially necessary to stand up against bullies and oppressors. As Dr. Martin Luther King famously said, "A threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Ukraine is the thin buffer protecting Europe, and by extension the free world, from Russia's anti-democratic agenda. In this David and Goliath struggle, Ukraine depends on military aid from the United States. When Ukraine fights for freedom, it is defending U.S. geopolitical interests and democratic values at no cost to American lives. Over 80% of the aid allocated to Ukraine is actually spent within the United States, creating much-needed jobs for Americans, including those working right here in the southern tier. I want to keep my statement brief because I know there are a lot of people that need to speak, and it's very, very cold outside. There are people, civilians in Ukraine, who are shivering in their homes as the Russian state violates human rights laws by directly attacking Ukraine's heat and energy infrastructure, as well as hospitals and schools. Men and women are shivering in the trenches as they defend their native language, culture, and identity. Children are shivering as they study remotely and in underground subway stations because the only way to learn safely under the constant bombardment of Russian missiles. Russia is violating human rights laws by attacking schools and hospitals. Think about the importance of your language, your race, your culture, your identity. In Russian-occupied territories, Ukrainians are being forced to speak Russian, to denounce their citizenship, or be killed. Think about your children. During this war, Russia has forcibly transferred almost 20,000 Ukrainian children to areas under its control, assigning them Russian citizenship and forcing them to be adopted by Russian families, forcing them to forget their native Ukrainian language and forcing them to learn Russian. The United Nations has stated that these deportations constitute war crimes. According to international law, including the 1948 Genocide Convention, such acts constitute genocide. Over 8 million people have lost their homes and have been displaced since this war. And while the war in Ukraine seems far away, it affects many of us right here in Broome County. Since the full-scale invasion, hundreds of Ukrainians are working here legally, cleaning our businesses, repairing your cars, caring for your students and elderly, delivering your packages. They have come here legally under the temporary protected status and humanitarian parole programs, such as U4U, that are now in danger under the new administration's proposed changes to immigration laws. While the war in Ukraine seems far away, there's much we can all do right here. The incoming administration has nominated a number of individuals for cabinet-level positions who have not been supportive of Ukraine or aid to Ukraine. Please call your senators and ask them to consider the impact of the incoming administration's nominees on Ukraine and Ukraine-related issues and immigration issues, given that they impact U.S. security, national interest, and the world order. On January 6th, 2025, Representatives Stephen Cohen and Joe Wilson reintroduced a bipartisan congressional resolution, HRS 16, condemning Russia's war in Ukraine as genocide. Please call your elected representatives and ask them to co-sponsor this bill. Finally, I want to invite you to show your support for Ukraine by participating in local Together for Ukraine events. Tom and Renee have kindly offered to circulate. We have 2 events coming up next weekend, which is the 3-year memorial of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So we're having a buy donation film showing of the film Bucha at 6 p.m. at Two Rivers Church on Friday, February 21st. It's the #1 movie in Ukrainian Netflix right now, and it's a dramatization of a true story of a Jewish refugee from Kazakhstan who comes and saves hundreds of Ukrainians in Bucha as it's occupied by Russian troops. On Saturday next week at noon on February 22nd, we will have our 3rd annual Interfaith Vigil at the Broome County Courthouse Square. And again, we invite you all to come. We're going to keep it short because we know how cold it is. Ukraine's fight for freedom, justice, and human rights is also our fight for freedom, justice, and human rights. Dr. King once said, "True peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice." Do not hate those who come from different perspectives than you. Use love to reach across the aisle, talk and listen, and find common ground in our love for justice and democracy in the United States. As hard as it may be to speak right now, we need each other, and we need you. Thank you so much.